Today is the 7th and last day of the September 90 7-day retreat in Springwater. Even though there are still many untold questions, we will leave them aside for this morning and instead read from the writings of two religious teachers, one who lived 1,000 years ago and one who just died about 4 years ago. Huang was a Zen teacher in China whose words, talks, and dialogues were recorded by his disciple, Su, who was also a Buddhist scholar and governor of the province in which Huang taught. The book is called The Zen Teaching of Huang Po, edited by John Blofeld, and I have excerpted passages, at times even leaving out words within the passages or sentences, sometimes substituting an English word for a Sanskrit word, for greater clarity and for, it's not to present Huang Po. If one wishes to read Huang Po, one has to get the book oneself. For people who are not familiar with Buddhism, the expression to become a Buddha means to want to become enlightened, to become an enlightened being, a perfect being, one with the Absolute. Buddha is not most of the time referring to the historical personage who lived even 1400 years before Huang Po taught. But the word also means enlightened mind or universal truth. We've read almost every time from these selections. So some people who have been here most of the time, like myself, probably know them pretty much by heart. But if one listens with new ears and eyes, one may see something new or hear something fresh. So it's helpful to be aware of not to start just going with a well-known tune, or the thought, I've heard this one before, barring direct perception, which such thoughts do. The Master said to me, all the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind. He has here one and mind capitalized. beside which nothing exists. This mind which is without beginning is unborn and indestructible. It is not green nor yellow and has neither form nor appearance. It does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of young or old. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits, measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and you at once fall into error. It is like the boundless void, which cannot be fathomed or measured. The one mind alone is the Buddha, and there is no distinction between the Buddha and sentient beings, but that sentient beings are attached to forms, and so seek eternally for Buddhahood. By their very seeking, they lose it, for that is using mind to grasp mind. Even though they do their utmost for a full eon, they will not be able to attain to it. People do not know that if they put a stop to conceptual thought and forget their anxiety, the Buddha will appear before them. As to performing the 6 parameters, which is pious practices like practicing charity, morality, patience under affliction, zealous application, right control of the mind, and the application of the highest wisdom. This is the 6 parameters. As to performing the 6 parameters and vast numbers of similar practices, or gaining merits as countless as the sands of the Ganges. Since you are fundamentally complete in every respect, you should not try to supplement that perfection by such meaningless practices. When there is occasion for them, perform them, and when the occasion is past, remain quiescent. If you are attached to forms, practices, and meritorious performances, your way of thinking is false and quite incompatible with the way. To practice the 6 parameters and a myriad similar practices with the intention of becoming a Buddha, thereby is to advance by stages, but the ever-existing Buddha is not a Buddha of stages. Only awake to the one mind, and there is nothing whatsoever to be attained. This is the real Buddha. Students of the way should understand that the 4 elements composing the body do not constitute a self. That the self is not an entity, and that it follows from this that the body is neither self nor entity. Moreover, the 5 aggregates composing the mind in the common sense do not constitute either a self or an entity. Hence it follows that the so-called individual mind is neither self nor entity. The 6 sense organs, including the brain, which, together with their 6 types of perception and objects of perception, must be understood in the same way. All are separately and together void. Void meaning empty of self. There is only mind source, limitless in extent and of absolute purity. Pesu, the student and disciple, a scholar who recorded this, asks, what is the way and how must it be followed? And Huang Po, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you would wish to follow it? Pesu, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? Huang Po, words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Huang Po, if they are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the teaching by preachers, for what sort of true teaching could that be? Questioner, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Huang Po, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way, everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. There cannot just be nothing. Huang Po, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Huang Po, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? The void here not meaning a white or black vacuum, but the green hills lit by sun, or moon, or the clouds covering the light of the sun. Whatever is there without naming, reacting, knowing, wanting or not wanting. Empty inside, so to speak. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Later the disciple says, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Huang Po, I have not prevented you, but concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Questioner, then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the Dharma, meaning the true teaching? Huang Po, where no feeling arises, who can say that you are right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? Huang Po, you're a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Pesu, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the true teaching to us, or the truth. Huang Po, in the true teaching there is no confusion. But you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of true teaching can you go seeking for? Pesu, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Huang Po, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. One time someone said, why doesn't he say, do pay attention to other people? I'm speculating it means to their true teachings. In quotation marks. People, there are just some people like mad dogs. There are some people just like mad dogs, barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. Later on he says, what is called supreme perfect wisdom implies that there is really nothing whatever to be attained. If you're able to understand this, you will realize that the way of the Buddhas and the way of the devils are equally wide of the mark. The original pure glistening universe is neither square nor round, big nor short. It is without any such distinctions as long or short. It is beyond attachment and activity. It is beyond ignorance and enlightenment. You must see clearly that there is really nothing at all. The great chilocosms, numberless as grains of sand, are mere bubbles. All wisdom and all holiness are but streaks of lightning. None of them have the reality of mind. Once I put this question to the Master: how many of the 400 or 500 persons gathered here on this mountain have fully understood your reverence's teachings? The Master answered, their number cannot be known. Why? Because this way is through mind awakening. How can it be conveyed in words? Speech only produces some effect when it falls on the uninstructed ears of children. When we talk of the knowledge that I may gain, the I is here in quotation marks, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my deliverance from rebirth, and my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity. which doesn't mean not getting up in the morning. Doing one's daily work, whatever it may be. Do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking, and do not look anywhere for the truth. For all that is needed is to refrain from allowing concepts to arise, which is a dangerous statement to make, because there can be learned techniques to suppress thought and create some kind of a semblance of emptiness or vacuity. If there is intelligence, the intelligence that comes out of direct seeing, that will not allow the concept to arise or to continue evoking all kinds of feelings and emotions throughout the body. It is obvious that mental concepts and internal perceptions are equally misleading, and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous to you as the way of the demons. He says, at this very moment, all sorts of erroneous thoughts are constantly flowing through our minds. How can you speak of our having none? Huang Po. Error has no substance. It is entirely the product of your thinking. If you see that mind is fundamentally without error, whenever thoughts arise, you will be fully convinced that they are responsible for errors. If you could prevent all conceptual movements of thought and still your thinking processes, naturally there would be no error left in you. Therefore it is said, when thoughts arise, then do all things arise. When thoughts vanish, then do all things vanish. What we're asking is, when thoughts arise and create disturbance, can that be seen? Seen from no position of judgment, condemnation, or acceptance. Not trying to banish them, control them, but see what it is. The seeing is the freeing, not the banishing of thoughts. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you recognize it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past. Not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. But how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? And with the distinction of this and that, usually invariably goes the judgment, the like, the dislike, attachment or repulsion, grasping or avoiding. And Huang Po says, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, the future has not yet come, or has yet to come. When you practice meditation, sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, and do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. Remember, someone was disturbed when remembering this injunction of Huang Po's, noticing disturbance in the mind at a thought arising. So, can the disturbance be seen without further disturbance? At some point, it can be an infinite regression. But there may be a moment of, what is this? What's going on? That's a pause in this infinite regression or progression, whatever. He says this alone is what is called liberation. We'll read two selections from Krishnamurti's notebook. He just started keeping a journal for less than a year in the 60s. In all the different places where he used to give talks. But I believe both of the selections that I picked are from India. In the opening of masses of leaves was a pink flower of 3 petals. It was embedded in green, and it too must have been surprised by its own beauty. It grew on a tall bush, struggling to survive among all that greenery. There was a huge tree towering over it, and there were several other bushes, all fighting for life. There were many other flowers on this bush, but this one among the leaves had no companion. It was all by itself, and so more startling. There was a slight breeze among the leaves, but it never got to this flower. It was motionless and alone, and because it was alone, it had a strange beauty, like a single star when the sky is bare. And beyond the green leaves was a black trunk of a palm. It wasn't really black, but it looked like the trunk of an elephant. And as you watched it, the black turned to a flowering pink. The evening sun was upon it, and all the treetops were afire, motionless. The breeze had died down, and patches of the setting sun were upon the leaves. A small bird was sitting on a branch, preening itself. It stopped to look around and presently flew off into the sun. We were sitting facing the musicians, who were facing the setting sun. There were very few of us, and the little drum was being played with remarkable skill and pleasure. It was really quite extraordinary what those fingers did. The player never looked at his hands. They seemed to have a life of their own, moving with great rapidity and firmness, striking the taut skin with precision. There was never hesitation. What the right hand did, the left hand never knew, for it was beating out a different rhythm, but always in harmony. The player was quite young, grave with sparkling eyes. He had talent and was delighted to be playing to that small, appreciative audience. Then a stringed instrument joined in, and the small drum followed. It was no longer alone. The sun had set, and the few wandering clouds were turning pale rose. At this latitude there is no twilight, and the moon, nearly full, was clear in a cloudless sky. Walking on that road with the moonlight on the water and the croaking of many frogs became a blessing. It is strange how far away the world is and into what great depth one has traveled. The telegraph poles, the buses, the bullock carts, and the worn-out villager were there beside you, but you were far away, so deep that no thought could follow. Every feeling stayed far away. You were walking, aware of everything that was happening around you, the darkening of the moon by masses of clouds, the warning of the cycle bell, but you were far away. Not you, but great, vast depth. This depth went on more profoundly within itself, past time and the limits of space. Memory could not follow it. Memory is tethered, but this was not. It was total, complete freedom, without route and direction. And deep, far from thought, there was bursting energy which was ecstasy, a word that has pleasurable, gratifying significance to thought, but thought could never capture it or travel the spaceless distance to pursue it. Thought is a barren thing and could never follow or communicate with that which is timeless. The thundering bus with its blinding lights nearly pushed one off the road into the dancing waters. The essence of control is suppression. The pure seeing puts an end to every form of suppression. Seeing is infinitely more subtle than mere control. Control is comparatively easy. It doesn't need much understanding, conformity to a pattern, obedience to an established authority, fear of not doing the right thing, of tradition, the drive for success. These are the very things that bring about suppression of what is, or the sublimation of what is. The pure act of seeing the fact, whatever the fact be, brings its own understanding, and from this, mutation takes place. These selections are taken from Krishnamurti to himself, his last journal, written 2 years before his death. I think he died in 86. Oh, these were not written, these were spoken into a tape recorder. On that, these were all spoken in Ojai, California. On that drive from the airport through large towns spreading out for many, many miles with glaring lights and so much noise, then taking the freeway and going through a small tunnel, you suddenly came upon the Pacific. It was a clear day without a breath of wind, but as it was early morning, there was a freshness before the pollution of the monoxide gas filled the air. The sea was so calm, almost like an immense lake, and the sun was just coming over the hill, and the deep waters of the Pacific were the color of the Nile, but at the edges they were light blue, gently lapping the shores. And there were many birds, and you saw in the distance a whale. Following the coast road, there were very few cars that morning, but houses everywhere. Probably very rich people lived there. And you saw the pleasant hills on the left when you arrived at the Pacific. There were houses right up among the hills, and the road wound in and out, following the sea, and again came upon another town. But fortunately, the highway didn't go through it. There was a naval center there with its modern means of killing humanity. And you went along and turned to the right, leaving the sea behind. And after the oil wells, you drove further away from the sea, through orange groves, past a golf course to a small village, the road winding through orange orchards, and the air was filled with the perfume of orange blossoms. And all the leaves of the trees were shining. There seemed to be such peace in this valley, so quiet, away from all crowds and noise and vulgarity. This country is beautiful, so vast, with deserts, snow-capped mountains, villages, great towns, and still greater rivers. The land is marvelously beautiful, all-inclusive. And we came to this house, which was still more quiet and beautiful, recently built, and with a cleanliness that houses in towns don't have. There were lots of flowers, roses, and so on. A place in which to be quiet, not just vegetate, but to be really, deeply, inwardly quiet. Silence is a great benediction. It cleanses the brain, gives vitality to it, and this silence builds up great energy, not the energy of thought or the energy of machines, but that unpolluted energy, untouched by thought. It is the energy that has incalculable capacity and skills. And this is a place where the brain, being very active, can be silent. That very intense activity of the brain has the quality and the depth and the beauty of silence. It is a new day, and the sun won't be up for an hour or so. It is quite dark, and the trees are silent, waiting for the dawn and the sun to rise behind the hills. There ought to be a prayer for dawn. It comes so slowly, penetrating the whole world. And here in this quiet, secluded house, surrounded by orange trees and a few flowers, it is extraordinarily quiet. There are no birds as yet singing their morning song. The world is asleep, at least in this part of the world, far from all civilization, from the noise, the brutality, the vulgarity, and the talk of politicians. Slowly, with great patience, the dawn begins in the deep silence of the night. It was broken by the morning dove and the hoot of an owl. There are several owls here. They were calling to each other. And the hills and the trees are beginning to awaken. In silence the dawn begins, it gets lighter and lighter, and the dew is on the leaf, and the sun is just climbing over the hill. The first rays of the sun are caught in those tall trees, in that old oak that has been there for a very, very long time. And the morning dove begins with its soft, mournful call. Across the road, across the orange trees, there is a peacock calling. Even in this part of the world there are peacocks. At least there are a few of them. And the day has begun. It is a wonderful day. It is so new, so fresh, so alive, and full of beauty. It is a new day without any past remembrances, without the call of another. There is great wonder when one looks at all the beauties, those bright oranges with the dark leaves, and the few flowers bright in their glory. One wonders at this extraordinary light which only this part of the world seems to have. One wonders as one looks at the creation which seems to have no beginning and no end. A creation not by cunning thought, but the creation of a new morning. This morning is as it has never been before, so bright, so clear. And the blue hills are looking down. It is the creation of a new day as it has never been before. There is a squirrel with a long, bushy tail, quivering and shy in the old pepper tree, which has lost many branches. It is getting very old. It must have seen many storms, as the oak has in its old age, quiet with a great dignity. It is new morning, full of an ancient life. It has no time, no problems. It exists, and that in itself is a miracle. It is a new morning without any memory. All the past days are over, gone, and the voice of the morning dove comes across the valley, and the sun is now over the hill, covering the earth. And it too has no yesterday. The trees and the sun and the flowers have no time. It is the miracle of a new day. Now he quotes someone. He has a conversation with someone. "We want continuity," said the man. "Continuity is part of our life. Continuity of generation after generation. Continuity of tradition, of the things we have known and remembered. We crave continuity and we must have it. Otherwise, what are we? Continuity is in the very roots of our being. To be is to continue. Death may come, there may be an end to many things, but there is always continuity. We go back to find our roots, our identity. If one has kept one's beginning as a family, probably one can trace it generation after generation for many centuries, if one is interested in that kind of thing. The continuity of the worship of God, the continuity of ideologies, the continuity of opinions, values, judgments, conclusions. There is a continuity in all the things one has remembered. There's a continuity from the moment we are born until we die, with all the experiences, all the knowledge that man has acquired. Is that an illusion? End of quote. What has continuity? That oak, probably 200 years old, has a continuity until it dies or is chopped down by man. And what is this continuity which man wants, craves for? The name, the form, the bank account, the things remembered. Memory has a continuity, remembrances of that which has been. The whole psyche is memory and nothing else. We attribute to the psyche a great many things, qualities, virtues, ignoble deeds, and the exercise of many clever acts in the outer and inner world. And if one examines diligently without any bias or conclusion, one begins to see that our whole existence, with a vast network of memories, remembrances, the things that have happened before, all have continuity. And we cling to that desperately. The squirrel has come back, has been away for a couple of hours. Now it is back on the branch, nibbling at something, watching, listening, extraordinarily alert and aware, alive, quivering with excitement. It comes and goes without telling you where it is going and when it is coming back. And as the day is getting warmer, the dove and the birds have gone. There are a few pigeons flying from one place to another in a group. You can hear their wings beating in the air. There used to be a fox here. One hasn't seen it for a long time. Probably it has gone away forever. There are too many people about. There are plenty of rodents, but people are dangerous. And this is a shy little squirrel, and wayward as the swallow. Although there is no continuity except memory, is there in the whole human being, in the brain, a place, a spot, an area small or vast, where memory doesn't exist at all, which memory has never touched? It is a remarkable thing to look at all this, to feel your way sanely, rationally, see the complexities and the intricacies of memory and its continuity, which is, after all, knowledge. Knowledge is always in the past. Knowledge is the past. The past is vast accumulated memory as tradition. And when you have trodden that path diligently, sanely, you must inevitably ask, is there an area in the human brain or in the very nature and structure of a human being, not merely in the outer world of his activities, but inwardly, deep in the vast recesses of his own brain, something that is not the outcome of memory, not the movement of a continuity. The hills and the trees, the meadows and the groves will continue as long as the earth exists, unless man in his cruelty and despair destroys it all. The stream, the spring from which it comes have a continuity, but one never asks whether the hills and beyond the hills have their own continuity. If there is no continuity, what is there? There's nothing. One is afraid to be nothing. Nothing means not a thing. Nothing put together by thought, nothing put together by memory, remembrances, nothing that you can put into words and then measure. There is most certainly, definitely an area where the past does not cast a shadow, where time, the past, or the future, or the present has no meaning. We have always tried to measure with words something that we don't know. What we do not know, we try to understand and give it words and make it into a continuous noise. And so we clog our brain, which is already clogged with past events, experiences, knowledge. We think knowledge is psychologically of great importance, but it is not. You can't ascend through knowledge. There must be an end to knowledge for the new to be. New is a word for something which has never been before. And that area cannot be understood or grasped by words or symbols. It is there beyond all remembrances. We will end here for today.